the first time Helena Granger walked into the Mercantile in Humboldt, Nevada. The laughter started before the door even closed behind her. She stood 6 feet and 3 inches tall in her worn boots, towering over every woman in town and most of the men too. At 22 years old, she had learned to keep her eyes down and her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself smaller in a world that had no place for a woman of her stature. The year was 1883, and the silver mining town nestled in the Humboldt Range had been her home for exactly 3 weeks, each day more painful than the last. "Lord have mercy," Mrs. Patterson whispered loudly to her companion near the flour barrels. "That Granger girl looks like a scarecrow came to life." Helena pretended not to hear, focusing instead on the list her father had given her that morning. Sugar, coffee, salt, thread. Simple things. She reached for the sugar tin on the top shelf without needing to stretch, and the giggles behind her intensified. "No wonder she is not married," another voice chimed in. "What man wants to look up at his wife? It is unnatural." Her cheeks burned as she gathered her items quickly, counting out coins with trembling fingers at the counter. The shopkeeper, Mr. Dennison, at least had the decency to keep his eyes neutral as he accepted her payment, though she caught the pitying look he gave her retreating back. The Nevada sun hit her face as she stepped outside, momentarily blinding after the dim interior. She loaded her purchases into the wagon her father had left for her, aware of the stares from every direction. 2 young women crossing the street actually stopped to point at her, their parasols bobbing as they whispered behind gloved hands. Helena climbed onto the wagon seat, feeling it creak under her weight. She was not just tall but solidly built, with broad shoulders and strong arms from years of farm work back in Ohio. Her mother had died calling her a freak of nature, unable to understand how she had birthed such an abnormally large daughter. Her father had brought them west hoping for a fresh start after her mother passed, but cruelty, Helena had learned, was not confined to any single territory. The horses knew the way back to their small ranch, 3 miles outside town. As they plodded along the dusty road, Helena allowed herself to cry, something she only did when alone. The tears carved clean tracks through the dust on her face. Their ranch was modest, just a small house and barn with enough land for a vegetable garden and a dozen cattle. Her father, Edmund Granger, was a quiet man who had grown quieter since her mother's death 2 years prior. He looked up from mending a fence as she approached. "Any trouble in town?" he asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "No more than usual," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. He nodded, accepting the lie because it was easier than confronting the truth. Helena unhitched the horses and carried the supplies inside, her height allowing her to reach the top cupboards without the stool her mother would have needed. It was one small practical advantage in a life otherwise made difficult by her size. That evening, she sat on the porch as the sun painted the Nevada mountains purple and gold. The beauty of the landscape never failed to move her, even through her loneliness. Out here, away from prying eyes and cruel tongues, she could almost forget that she was different. The next Sunday, her father insisted they attend church. Helena wore her best dress, a blue calico she had sewn herself with extra length in the hem and sleeves. Even so, it showed more of her ankles than was proper, and she could feel the judgment radiating from the other women as they filed into the small wooden church. She folded herself into a pew near the back, trying to make her tall frame as unobtrusive as possible. The Reverend's sermon about loving thy neighbor rang hollow as she felt the curious stares boring into her back. During the final hymn, a young boy no more than 8 years old tugged on his mother's sleeve and asked in a voice that carried through the whole building, Why is that lady so big? Is she a giant? The laughter was poorly concealed behind him books. Helena kept her eyes fixed on the cross above the altar, blinking back tears, singing the words by memory since her vision had blurred too much to read them. After the service, she fled to the wagon while her father spoke with some of the other ranchers. She was almost to safety when a group of young women her own age approached, their pretty faces arranged in false sympathy. Miss Granger, the leader, a petite blonde named Caroline Wells, called out, "We are organizing a social next week. Dancing and refreshments. You should come." Helena knew a trap when she heard one. "Thank you, but I do not think that would be appropriate." "Oh, but why not?" Caroline's blue eyes were wide with manufactured innocence. "Surely you enjoy dancing." "Who would dance with her?" One of the other girls whispered, not quietly enough. "She would tower over every man there. It would look ridiculous." "Perhaps she could dance with another woman," suggested a third, setting off a fresh round of giggles. Helena climbed onto the wagon without responding, snapping the reins harder than necessary. She heard their laughter following her down the street, mixing with the wind and the jingle of harnesses. The days blurred together in a haze of chores and isolation. She tended the garden, fed the chickens, helped her father with the cattle. She became adept at timing her trips to town for when the streets would be least crowded, slipping in and out of shops like a ghost. The loneliness settled into her bones like an ache that never quite went away. 3 months after arriving in Humboldt, everything changed on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Helena was in town to pick up a plow blade her father had ordered from the blacksmith. The smithy was at the far end of Main Street, and she walked quickly with her head down, ignoring the usual stares. She was so focused on reaching her destination that she did not see the group of men until she had nearly walked into them. They were ranch hands from one of the larger spreads, already drunk despite the early hour. One of them, a burly man with a thick beard, stepped directly into her path. "Well now, what do we have here?" he drawled, looking up at her with bleary eyes. "You are one tall drink of water, are you not?" Helena tried to step around him, but he moved to block her again. His companions laughed. "What is the matter, sweetheart? You too high and mighty to talk to regular folk." His breath reeked of whiskey. "Please let me pass," Helena said quietly, her heart pounding. "She talks," another man crowed. "Hey boys, how tall do you reckon she is? 6 feet, more." "Taller than any woman has a right to be," the bearded man said. He reached out as if to grab her arm, and Helena jerked backward. "I said let me pass." "Or what?" The man stepped closer, his face ugly with drink and mean spirits. "You going to make me?" "Unnatural creature like you, probably stronger than a man too. That what you are? Some kind of man dressed up in skirts." The words hit her like physical blows. Helena felt her eyes filling with tears, which only made the men laugh harder. She tried once more to walk around them, but they had formed a loose circle now, taunting her. "Dance for us, giant girl. Show us how you move on those long legs. Maybe we should measure her, see if she is as big as she looks." Helena was trembling now, humiliation and fear warring in her chest. She looked around desperately for help, but the few people on the street had turned away, unwilling to intervene. She was trapped, surrounded by men who saw her as nothing more than an object of mockery. Then a voice cut through the jeering like a whip crack. "That is enough." The circle of men parted slightly, and Helena saw him for the first time. He was the tallest man she had ever seen, standing at least 6 feet and 7 inches, possibly more. He wore dusty trail clothes and a black hat that added even more height to his imposing frame. His shoulders were broad as a barn door, and his hands, resting casually near the twin revolvers at his hips, were the size of dinner plates. His face was tanned and angular, with dark eyes that held no warmth as he surveyed the drunken ranch hands. "Move along," the giant stranger said, his voice quiet but carrying an undercurrent of steel. The bearded man puffed up his chest, emboldened by drink and the presence of his friends. "This is none of your concern, mister. We are just having a bit of fun." "Does she look like she is having fun?" The stranger took a step forward, and despite his drunkenness, the bearded man stumbled backward. "I will say it once more. Move along." Something in his tone, or perhaps the way his hand hovered near his gun, convinced the men that discretion was the better part of valor. They scattered with a few final muttered insults, weaving their way toward the saloon. Helena stood frozen, looking up at her rescuer. Even in her considerable height, she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Those dark eyes softened as they settled on her. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Up close, she could see that he was younger than his weathered appearance suggested, probably in his late 20s. His face, though serious, was not unkind. "Did they hurt you?" "No," she managed. "Thank you for intervening." He touched the brim of his hat. "Any decent man would have done the same, though I noticed there was a shortage of decent men on this street just now." He glanced around at the townspeople who were carefully avoiding looking in their direction. Helena felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat. "They think I am a freak. A woman my size is unnatural, you see." The stranger studied her for a long moment. Then, to her absolute shock, he smiled. It transformed his entire face, bringing warmth to his features and crinkling the corners of his eyes. "You are perfect for a man my size," he said simply. Helena stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon. I said you are perfect." "Do you know how rare it is for me to meet a woman I can look in the eye without breaking my neck bending down?" He extended his hand. "Vincent O'Connor. Most people call me Vince." She took his hand automatically, feeling her own disappear into his massive grip. "Helena Granger." "Miss Granger, I would consider it an honor if you would allow me to escort you to wherever you were heading. These streets do not seem particularly safe for a lady alone." She should have said no. She did not know this man, this Vincent O'Connor who stood head and shoulders above everyone else in sight. But something in his earnest expression and the novel experience of having to look up at someone made her nod. "The blacksmith shop," she said. "I am picking up an order for my father." They walked together down Main Street, and Helena was acutely aware of the stares they attracted. But for the first time, the attention did not make her want to shrink into herself. Next to Vincent, she felt almost delicate. His presence beside her was like a shield against the whispers and pointed fingers. "How long have you been in Humboldt?" Vincent asked as they walked. "3 months. We have a small ranch outside town. My father and I, and your mother, she passed 2 years ago." "I am sorry." His condolence sounded genuine. "My own mother died when I was young. My father as well. Growing up without them was difficult." They reached the blacksmith shop, and Vincent held the door open for her. Helena had to duck only slightly to enter, while Vincent had to fold himself nearly in half. The blacksmith, a short, stocky man named O'Brien, looked up from his work and did a double take at the sight of them together. "Miss Granger," he said, recovering quickly, "your father's plow blade is ready." His eyes shifted to Vincent. "And who might you be, stranger, Vincent O'Connor?" "Just passing through." "Passing through to where?" O'Brien asked as he retrieved the blade from his workshop. "Wherever the road takes me. I have been working ranch jobs up and down Nevada and California for the past few years. Saved up enough to buy my own spread, so now I am looking for the right piece of land." Helena's heart sank. Passing through. Of course he was. Why would he stay? O'Brien wrapped the blade and took Helena's payment. "You might want to talk to Edmund Granger, Miss Granger's father." He would know what land is available around these parts. Vincent looked at Helena. Would your father mind an unexpected visitor? I think he would appreciate the company, Helena said carefully. We do not get many visitors. They loaded the plow blade into Helena's wagon, Vincent lifting it as easily as if it weighed nothing. He had his own horse tied at the hitching post, a massive bay gelding that looked better suited to pulling a freight wagon than carrying a rider. That is Goliath, Vincent said, following her gaze. He is the only horse I have found that can carry me for more than a few hours without complaining. They rode out of town together, Helena in her wagon and Vincent on Goliath beside her. The afternoon sun was warm, and a pleasant breeze carried the scent of sagebrush. Helena kept sneaking glances at Vincent, still half convinced she had imagined the entire encounter. "May I ask you something?" Vincent said after they had been riding for a while. "Of course." "Why do you hunch your shoulders like that? You did it in town too, like you are trying to make yourself smaller." Helena felt her cheeks flush. "I suppose I am. It is a habit." "You should not," he said firmly. "You should stand proud. There is nothing wrong with your height." "Easy for you to say. Men are expected to be tall and strong. Women are supposed to be small and delicate. I am neither." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "I know what it is like to be different," he said finally. "When I was growing up, the other children called me a monster. Adults would cross the street to avoid walking near me. I was clumsy with my size, always breaking things, taking up too much space. For a long time I hated myself for being what I was." "What changed?" Helena asked softly. "I met a man, an old cowboy named Red Sawyer, when I was about 16. He was the first person who did not treat me like I was some kind of circus attraction. He taught me to ride, to rope, to shoot. He told me that God made all kinds of people and there was a reason for each one. He said my size was a gift, not a curse, and I needed to learn to use it right." Vincent smiled at the memory. He was about 5.5 feet tall. Red was toughest little rooster you ever met. Helena found herself smiling too. "He sounds like a good man. The best. He died 4 years ago, left me his saddle and his philosophy on life." They arrived at the Granger ranch as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. Edmund Granger looked up from the water trough he was repairing, his eyes widening at the sight of Vincent. "Father, this is Vincent O'Connor," Helena said as she climbed down from the wagon. "He helped me in town today, and Mr. O'Brien suggested he speak with you about available land in the area." Edmund approached, craning his neck to look up at Vincent. "Helped you? What happened?" "Some ranch hands had too much to drink," Vincent interjected smoothly. "Nothing serious, but I thought it best to see Miss Granger safely to her destination." Edmund's face darkened, but he nodded. "I appreciate that, Mr. O'Connor. Any man who looks out for my daughter is welcome at my table. Will you stay for supper?" "I would be honored, sir." Helena prepared the meal while the men talked outside. She could hear the rumble of their voices through the open window as she fried salt pork and boiled potatoes. Her hands shook slightly as she worked. She could not stop thinking about what Vincent had said. "You are perfect for a man my size." No one had ever called her perfect before. Supper was a lively affair, livelier than any meal Helena could remember since her mother's death. Vincent had a gift for storytelling, recounting his adventures working ranches across the West with humor and vivid detail. He spoke of flash floods in Arizona, a cattle drive through the Sierra Nevada, a winter so cold in Montana that the whiskey froze solid in the bottle. Edmund laughed more than Helena had heard in years. She found herself laughing too, relaxed in a way she had not been since they arrived in Humboldt. After the meal, Edmund spread out a hand-drawn map on the table. "There are a few parcels available," he said, pointing to various locations. This one here, about 5 miles north, has good water rights and decent grazing. The previous owner went back east after his wife died. The bank has been trying to sell it for over a year now. Vincent studied the map with interest. How much land? 300 acres, give or take. There is a house too, though it needs work. I would like to see it, Vincent said. He glanced at Helena. Would you be willing to show me around the area tomorrow, Miss Granger? Your father mentioned you know this land well. Helena's heart leaped. I would be happy to. It is settled then, Edmund said. You can bed down in the barn tonight, Mr. O'Connor. We do not have much, but the hay is clean and dry. Vincent thanked him and bid them both good night. After he left, Edmund turned to Helena with a speculative look. He is a good man, he said carefully, and he looks at you like you are the sunrise. Father, Helena protested, but she could not quite hide her smile. That night she lay in her small bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. She was afraid to hope, afraid to believe that someone like Vincent O'Connor could truly be interested in someone like her. But the memory of his smile and his words kept her awake long into the night. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Helena dressed with extra care, choosing her newer calico dress and braiding her long brown hair neatly. When she emerged from the house, Vincent was already waiting by the horses, talking easily with her father. They rode out together, Helena pointing out landmarks and boundaries as they went. Vincent was an easy companion, asking intelligent questions about water sources and soil quality, but also pointing out the beauty of a hawk circling overhead or the way the morning light painted the mountains. The property Edmund had mentioned sat in a small valley with a creek running through it. The house was indeed in need of repair, but it was solidly built with good bones. Vincent walked through it carefully, his footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. I could make something of this, he said, more to himself than to Helena. It would take work, but I have time and strong hands. They stood on the porch looking out over the land. Vincent was quiet for a long moment before he spoke. Miss Granger, I need to be honest with you about something. Helena's stomach clenched. Here it came, the revelation that would make sense of why he had been so kind. He had a wife somewhere. He was leaving Nevada. He was not actually interested in her at all. I came to Humboldt looking for land, that much is true, Vincent continued, but I also came because I was lonely. I have spent years drifting from place to place, working hard, saving money, but never putting down roots. Do you know why? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because everywhere I went, I was alone. The tallest man in every room the oddity people stared at. I told myself I did not mind, that I did not need companionship. But yesterday, when I saw you on that street, saw those men taunting you, I recognized something in your eyes. The same loneliness I see in my own mirror every morning. He turned to face her fully, and Helena was struck again by how rare it was to meet someone's eyes at her own level. I meant what I said yesterday. You are perfect for a man my size. But more than that, I think you might be perfect for me, period. I know this is forward and we have only just met, but I would like permission to court you properly, Miss Granger, if you will have me. Helena's breath caught in her throat. She searched his face for any sign of mockery or cruelty, but found only sincerity. Why? She whispered. Why me? Because when I look at you, I do not see someone too tall or too different. I see a beautiful woman who has been hurt by small-minded people. I see strength and grace and kindness in your eyes, despite everything you have endured. I see someone I could build a life with, someone who understands what it is like to be different and to be alone. He paused. And if I am being completely honest, I see someone whose hand I can hold without feeling like I am going to break her fingers. That last comment startled a laugh out of Helena, and suddenly the tears she had been holding back spilled over, but they were not tears of sadness. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you may court me." Vincent's face broke into a grin so wide and genuine that it made him look years younger. "You have just made me the happiest man in Nevada." The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Helena's life. Vincent purchased the property and threw himself into repairing the house with the same determination he brought to everything else. Helena found reasons to ride out to his ranch nearly every day, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just her company. They would walk the property together, Vincent sharing his plans for building up the herd and improving the grazing land. Helena offered suggestions drawn from her experience helping her father. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering shared loves of literature and music, debating politics and philosophy, laughing at each other's jokes. Vincent began joining the Grangers for Sunday church services, and Helena took fierce satisfaction in the shocked faces of the townspeople when they walked in together. Vincent, oblivious to the stares or perhaps simply unconcerned by them, treated Helena with a respect and tenderness that was impossible to miss. After the first service they attended together, Caroline Wells approached them with her usual pack of friends in tow. "Mr. O'Connor," she said, batting her eyelashes in what she probably thought was a fetching manner, "we are having that social I mentioned to Miss Granger next Saturday. We would be delighted if you would attend." Vincent looked down at her with polite disinterest. "Will Miss Granger be attending?" Caroline's smile faltered. "Well, I suppose if she wishes to come, she certainly may, but I thought you might prefer to meet some of the other young ladies in town." "I cannot imagine why I would want to meet anyone else when I am already acquainted with the finest woman in Humboldt." Vincent offered his arm to Helena. "Shall we go, my dear? Your father is waiting." Helena took his arm, her head held high, and they walked away, leaving Caroline and her friends gaping behind them. "You are going to make me cry again," Helena murmured as they walked. "Good tears, I hope. The very best kind." As summer deepened into fall, Vincent's ranch began to take shape. He hired a few men from out of town to help with the heavy work, deliberately choosing his crew from other places to avoid the locals who had treated Helena so poorly. His small herd grew, supplemented by purchases from ranchers in neighboring counties. One crisp October afternoon, Vincent invited Helena and her father to see the finished house. Edmund rode in the wagon while Vincent and Helena rode side by side on their horses, comfortable in the companionable silence that had developed between them. The house was transformed. Vincent had repaired the roof, replaced broken windows, and added a new porch that wrapped around two sides of the building. Inside, new furniture stood in the main room and cheerful curtains hung at the windows. "It is wonderful," Helena said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "You have done so much work." "I had good motivation," Vincent replied. He glanced at Edmund, who nodded almost imperceptibly and excused himself to go examine the new barn. When they were alone, Vincent took Helena's hands in his own. "I want to show you something." He led her upstairs to a bedroom that clearly had received special attention. The walls had been freshly painted a soft cream color, and a beautiful iron bed frame stood against one wall. But what caught Helena's attention was the doorway. "You raised it," she said, touching the frame. Unlike the rest of the house, where even she had to duck slightly at the thresholds, this doorway had been built tall enough for both of them to walk through comfortably. "I raised all the doorways in the house," Vincent said, "and I built the counters in the kitchen higher than standard. I wanted this to be a house where we could both live comfortably, without constantly having to bend and stoop." Helena's heart was pounding. Vincent dropped to one knee, which brought his eyes almost level with hers even though he was kneeling. From his pocket, He drew out a simple gold band. "Helena Granger, I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your kind heart. I love the way you laugh and the way you think and the way you see the world. I love that when I hold you, we fit together perfectly. I want to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with you. Will you marry me?" Helena pulled him to his feet and kissed him, her answer clear without words. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she whispered, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married on a cold November day in 1883. The ceremony took place in the small church, with Edmund giving Helena away with tears in his eyes. Half the town attended, mostly out of curiosity, but Helena did not care about the whispers or the stares. She had eyes only for Vincent, who waited for her at the altar looking more handsome than any man had a right to be in his black suit. Reverend Matthews had to tilt his head back to look at them both as he performed the ceremony. When Vincent kissed his bride, he did not have to bend down, and Helena did not have to stand on her toes. They met in the middle, equal and perfect. The reception was held at Vincent's ranch, which was already beginning to be called the O'Connor spread. Edmund had hired a small group of musicians from Carson City, and they played lively tunes as the sun set over the mountains. Vincent led Helena into the first dance, and she realized with a start that this was the first time she had ever danced with a man. Every other social occasion, she had been too tall, too awkward, too different. But Vincent swept her across the makeshift dance floor with surprising grace for a man his size, and Helena felt like she was floating. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, seeing the expression on her face. "That I never believed I could be this happy," Helena said honestly. "That for so long, I thought I would spend my whole life alone because of what I am. And now here I am, married to the most wonderful man I have ever known." "You are going to make me cry in front of all these people," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "Good tears, the very best kind." They spent their wedding night in the house Vincent had prepared so carefully. As Helena stood in the bedroom with the specially raised doorway, looking at her new husband in the lamplight, she felt a completeness she had never known was possible. Vincent took her face gently in his large hands. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how loved you are," he promised, and he kept that promise. The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and simple joys. Together, they built up the ranch, working side by side from dawn until dusk. Helena proved to be as capable as any ranch hand, her height and strength allowing her to handle tasks that would have been difficult for smaller women. Vincent never failed to praise her contributions, never made her feel like she should be confined to the house or limited to traditional women's work. Instead, he treated her as a full partner in their enterprise, valuing her opinions and relying on her judgment. They faced challenges, of course. A harsh winter that first year killed several head of cattle. A summer drought the next year threatened their water supply. But they faced these obstacles together, supporting each other through the difficult times. The townspeople of Humboldt gradually grew accustomed to the sight of the unusually tall couple. Some remained hostile or mocking, but many others came to respect Vincent and Helena for their hard work and integrity. Vincent was known as a fair man to do business with, and Helena quietly helped several struggling families through difficult times, sharing produce from her garden or lending a hand with difficult tasks. In the spring of 1885, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, remembering how her own mother had called her a freak. What if she passed on her unusual height to her child? What if the baby was too large, too different? Vincent held her as she cried out her fears, stroking her hair and whispering reassurances. "Our child will be loved and cherished no matter what," he told her firmly. Tall or short, boy or girl, it does not matter. This baby is a gift, Helena, a miracle created by our love. What if the baby is like us? Helena asked. What if other children are cruel? Then we will teach our child what we learned, Vincent said. That being different is not a curse, that there is strength in standing out, and that the opinions of small-minded people matter far less than the love of family. Helena gave birth on a snowy December day, attended by a midwife from Carson City who Edmund had brought in specifically because she was known for her discretion and skill. The labor was long and difficult, but when Helena finally held her son in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. The baby was indeed large, nearly 12 pounds at birth, with a lusty cry and a shock of dark hair. They named him Edmund Vincent O'Connor, after both his grandfathers. Vincent wept openly when he held his son for the first time, this giant of a man reduced to tears by the tiny life in his massive hands. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Edmund Sr. was equally smitten with his grandson, spending hours rocking the baby and singing old songs from his own childhood. The happiness in the old man's face was a beautiful thing to see. Baby Edmund grew quickly, as might be expected given his parents' stature. By his first birthday, he was already the size of an average 2-year-old. But unlike his mother's childhood, Edmund grew up in a home filled with love and acceptance. Vincent and Helena made sure he knew that his size was nothing to be ashamed of. The family attended church regularly, and while some of the townspeople still whispered, many others began to change their attitudes. It was hard to maintain cruel mockery when faced with the reality of a happy, loving family. Mothers who had once pointed and laughed found themselves asking Helena for advice on child rearing. Men who had dismissed Vincent as a freak began to seek his counsel on ranching matters. Slowly, grudgingly, Humboldt began to accept the O'Connors. When Edmund was 3 years old, Helena gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named William and Rose. Both babies were large and healthy, and the sight of Vincent trying to juggle 2 infants while keeping track of an energetic toddler became a common and endearing one around the ranch. Helena had never been happier. Her days were full of the chaos and joy of raising 3 young children. Her nights were spent in Vincent's arms, talking about their dreams for the future, or simply enjoying the comfortable silence of 2 people who knew each other deeply. Edmund Sr. lived to see his grandchildren grow into bright, lively youngsters before he passed peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1890. He was buried on a hillside overlooking both the Granger and O'Connor ranches, with a view of the mountains he had loved. Helena grieved deeply for her father, but she took comfort in knowing he had spent his final years surrounded by the family he cherished. Vincent was her rock through this difficult time, just as she had been his support through various challenges over the years. The children continued to grow, all 3 showing signs that they would inherit their parents' impressive height. Helena watched carefully for any signs that they were being mistreated, ready to defend them fiercely. But to her surprise and relief, young Edmund, William, and Rose were generally accepted by the other children in Humboldt. Part of this acceptance came from the O'Connors' growing prominence in the community. Vincent had expanded their ranch significantly, and they now employed several ranch hands year-round. They were known as fair and generous employers, and their financial success brought them a certain amount of respect that transcended physical appearance. But more than that, the children themselves were confident and secure in who they were. Vincent and Helena had instilled in them a sense of self-worth that made them largely impervious to teasing. When other children made comments about their height, they responded with good-natured humor rather than shame. One afternoon in 1893, when Edmund was 8 and the twins were 5, Helena stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard. Vincent came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I was remembering the day we met," Helena said. "How miserable I was, how certain that I would never find happiness or acceptance. And now I have everything I ever dreamed of and so much more. A wonderful husband, beautiful children, a home, respect in the community. Some days I have to pinch myself to make sure it is all real." Vincent turned her to face him. "It is real, and you deserve every bit of it. You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I know. I thank God every day that I was in Humboldt that afternoon." "I love you," Helena said simply. "I love you too, always." As the years passed, the O'Connor ranch prospered. Vincent proved to have a shrewd business sense, making smart investments and expansions. By 1895, they were one of the most successful ranching operations in Humboldt County. But success never changed Vincent or Helena. They remained the same hard-working, humble people they had always been. Vincent was known for helping neighbors in need, whether that meant lending equipment or manpower during busy seasons. Helena continued her quiet charity work, now openly acknowledged and appreciated by the community. The children grew into fine young people. Edmund, at 13, was already nearly 6 feet tall and showed every sign of eventually surpassing even his father's height. He had Vincent's dark eyes and Helena's thoughtful nature, and he displayed a natural talent for working with horses. William and Rose, now 10, were inseparable despite their different personalities. William was adventurous and outgoing, always the first to try something new. Rose was quieter but possessed a sharp intelligence and a gift for mathematics that impressed her schoolteacher. In 1898, Helena gave birth to their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Grace. Unlike her siblings, Grace was average-sized at birth, and as she grew, it became clear she would not inherit her parents' unusual height. If anything, she seemed likely to be rather petite. Vincent and Helena loved her no less for being different from her siblings. If anything, Grace's smaller stature made her even more precious to them, a reminder that every child was unique and perfect in their own way. Caroline Wells, who had married a banker and moved to Carson City, returned to Humboldt for a visit when Grace was 2 years old. She sought out Helena after church one Sunday, her manner considerably more humble than it had been in their youth. "Mrs. O'Connor," she said, "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you when we first met. I was young and foolish, and I said and did things I am deeply ashamed of now." Helena looked at the woman who had once led the charge in mocking her, seeing genuine remorse in her eyes. "I appreciate your apology, Mrs. Hutchinson," Helena said graciously. "We were all young once. What matters is who we choose to become." Caroline smiled with relief. "You have become someone wonderful. Everyone in town speaks so highly of you and your family. You have everything I thought I wanted, and you have it because you are genuinely good people. I envy you, but in the best possible way." After Caroline left, Vincent appeared at Helena's elbow. "That must have felt good." "It did," Helena admitted, "but you know what feels even better? Knowing that I do not need her apology to be happy. I would have been just as content whether she apologized or not." "That is because you have grown into the woman I always knew you could be," Vincent said. "Strong and confident and secure in who you are." "We grew into who we are together," Helena corrected. "I could never have done it without you." The turn of the century brought changes to Humboldt and to Nevada as a whole. The silver boom was long over, but the town had survived and even thrived by adapting to ranching and agriculture. The O'Connor Ranch remained a cornerstone of the local economy, providing jobs and stability. Edmund Jr., now 18 and towering at 6 feet and 10 inches, announced his intention to stay on the ranch and learn the business from his father. Vincent could not have been more proud. Together, they began planning expansions and improvements that would carry the ranch into the new century. William and Rose, 15 years old and both over 6 feet tall themselves, were still deciding their futures. William talked about seeing the world beyond Nevada, perhaps joining the army or trying his hand at prospecting. Rose wanted to continue her education, a goal both her parents fully supported despite the raised eyebrows of some of the more traditional townspeople. Little Grace, now 5 years old and full of mischief, was the darling of the family. At barely 3 feet tall, she looked comically small next to her giant siblings and parents, but she had everyone wrapped around her tiny finger. One evening in 1903, Helena and Vincent sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done countless times over the 20 years of their marriage. Their hair was starting to show threads of gray, and their faces bore the lines of hard work and laughter. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked suddenly. "Settling here, tying yourself to someone the town called a freak." Vincent pulled her close, and she settled against his broad chest, fitting perfectly as she always had. "I have never regretted a single moment," he said firmly. "Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love and companionship and partnership. How could I possibly regret any of that? We have had a good life, have we not?" Helena said softly. "The very best life, and it is not over yet. We have many more years ahead of us, many more sunsets to watch together." "Promise me something," Helena said. "Anything. Promise me that you will always remember how much I love you. How grateful I am that you walked into my life that day and saw me, really saw me, when everyone else just saw someone too tall and strange to be worthy of kindness." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "I promise, and you must promise me the same. Promise me you will always know that you are perfect exactly as you are, that your height and your strength and your uniqueness are all parts of what make you the woman I love. I promise." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of laughter as their children played some game before bedtime. The ranch spread out around them, a testament to everything they had built together. In 1905, Rose O'Connor became the first woman from Humboldt to attend the University of Nevada in Reno, studying mathematics and education. Her parents helped her move into a boarding house, Vincent having to duck through doorways and Helena drawing stairs as they always did in new places. But Rose walked with her head high, her parents' daughter in every way that mattered. William, unable to resist the call of adventure, joined the army and was stationed in the Philippines. His letters home were full of descriptions of exotic places and strange new experiences. Helena worried about him constantly, but she took pride in his courage and independence. Edmund Jr. married a sensible girl named Margaret from a neighboring ranch in 1906. Margaret was herself tall, standing 5 feet and 11 inches, and she fit seamlessly into the O'Connor family. Within a year, she gave Vincent and Helena their first grandchild, a healthy boy they named Vincent Jr. The sight of Vincent holding his tiny grandson, 4 generations of strength and love represented in that moment, brought tears to Helena's eyes. "What am I crying about now?" Vincent teased gently. "Everything," Helena said. "The past, the present, the future, how far we have come, how blessed we are." Grace, now 10 years old and showing signs that she would indeed be the smallest of the O'Connor children, stood on her tiptoes to peer at her new nephew. "He is so tiny," she marveled. "You were that small once," Helena told her. "Was I really?" Grace looked skeptical. Given that she was surrounded by giants, it was perhaps understandable that she had trouble imagining being even smaller. As the years rolled on, the O'Connor family continued to grow and flourish. Rose returned from university with her degree and accepted a teaching position at the Humboldt School, becoming one of the first female teachers in the county. She eventually married a quiet geology professor from the university, and they split their time between Reno and Humboldt. William completed his service in the Army and returned home in 1910, more mature and focused than when he had left. He worked alongside his father and brother on the ranch, bringing new ideas and techniques he had learned during his travels. Grace, against all predictions, proved to be the most adventurous of the O'Connor children. At 18, she moved to San Francisco to pursue a career in nursing, her small stature proving to be an advantage in the crowded hospital wards. Vincent and Helena watched their children build their own lives with pride and occasional pangs of sadness at how quickly the years had flown. But they still had each other, and the deep love they shared had only grown stronger with time. In 1913, Humboldt celebrated its 50th anniversary as an incorporated town. A large celebration was planned, and Vincent and Helena were asked to speak at the ceremony as respected members of the community. Helena was nervous about speaking in public, old insecurities rising to the surface. But Vincent, as always, was her rock. "You have nothing to fear," he told her the night before the celebration. "You are one of the most admired women in this town. People respect you, Helena. They have for years." "Some people still stare," Helena said. "Let them stare. You are remarkable, and remarkable things draw attention. But it is not the cruel attention of our youth anymore. It is admiration." The celebration was held in the town square, with bunting and flags decorating every building. A platform had been erected for the speakers, and Helena climbed the steps with Vincent at her side, both of them having to mind their heads on the canopy that had been erected over the stage. The mayor spoke first, talking about the town's history and growth. Then he introduced Vincent and Helena. Vincent spoke about the importance of community and acceptance, about building something lasting through hard work and integrity. His deep voice carried clearly across the square, and the crowd listened with rapt attention. Then it was Helena's turn. She looked out at the sea of faces, seeing people who had once mocked her, people who had become friends, young people who had grown up knowing her as a respected member of the community. "When I first came to Humboldt 30 years ago," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I was a frightened young woman who believed she would never find a place to belong. I was different, and I had been taught that being different was a curse." She paused, finding Vincent's eyes in the crowd. He smiled at her encouragingly. "But this town, and particularly one very special man, taught me that being different could be a gift. I learned that acceptance and love were possible, even for someone like me. I learned that a community could change and grow, just as individuals can." Helena looked around at the crowd, her head held high. "I am grateful to call Humboldt my home. I am grateful for every person here who has shown my family kindness and friendship over the years. And I am grateful for the opportunity to help build a town where all people, regardless of how they look or where they come from, can find acceptance and belonging." The applause was thunderous. People stood and cheered, and Helena saw more than a few people wiping their eyes. Vincent joined her on the platform and took her hand, raising it high. The crowd cheered even louder. Later that night, as they rode home under a canopy of stars, Vincent said, "I am so proud of you." "For what?" "For giving a speech. For being brave enough to be yourself, even when it was hard." for rising above the cruelty and becoming someone extraordinary, for showing everyone in that town what real strength looks like. Helena leaned against his shoulder. I could not have done any of it without you. We did it together, Vincent said, just like we do everything. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives do. Vincent's health began to decline in 1918, his heart struggling to keep up with the demands of his massive frame. He was 63 years old and had worked hard his entire life. Helena cared for him tenderly, refusing to let him see her fear. The children came home to visit as often as they could, bringing grandchildren who climbed carefully onto their grandfather's lap to hear his stories. On a warm evening in June 1919, Vincent and Helena sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Vincent's breathing was labored, and Helena knew without being told that the end was near. I am not afraid, Vincent told her, holding her hand. I have had the most wonderful life. I got to spend nearly 40 years loving you. I got to raise beautiful children and watch them build their own lives. I built something with my own hands that will last long after I am gone. What more could any man ask for? I am not ready to let you go, Helena whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know, my love, but you are stronger than you think. You always have been. You will carry on and you will continue to be the amazing woman you are. And someday when your time comes, I will be waiting for you. Do you really believe that? I believe that a love like ours does not end just because our bodies give out. I believe I will love you beyond death and beyond anything that comes after. You are woven into my soul, Helena. Nothing can change that. Vincent passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family. Helena held his hand until the very end, whispering her love to him even after he could no longer respond. The grief was crushing. For weeks, Helena moved through her days in a fog, going through the motions of living but feeling hollowed out inside. The children worried about her, taking turns staying at the ranch to make sure she was eating and caring for herself. But gradually, slowly, Helena began to heal. She threw herself into running the ranch with Edmund Jr.'s help, finding solace in hard work and familiar routines. She spent time with her grandchildren, seeing Vincent's smile in their faces and his kindness in their actions. And every evening, she sat on the porch and talked to Vincent as if he were still beside her, telling him about her day and the family and the 1,000 small things that made up a life. It brought her comfort to maintain this connection, and she felt his presence in the wind and the stars and the land they had loved together. In 1925, the town of Humboldt held a ceremony to dedicate a new community center. The building was named the Vincent O'Connor Memorial Hall, in honor of the man who had contributed so much to the town's growth and prosperity. Helena, now 74 years old and still standing straight and tall, cut the ribbon to open the building. Inside, a portrait of Vincent hung in the main hall, showing him as he had been in his prime, strong and confident and kind. Below the portrait, a plaque read, Vincent O'Connor, 1856–1919. A man who taught us that true strength lies not in conforming to others' expectations, but in embracing who you are meant to be. Helena stood before the portrait for a long time, remembering the shy young giant who had told her she was perfect. Tears ran down her weathered face, but they were good tears, the kind Vincent had always said were the best kind. I did not realize this was such a sad occasion, a voice said beside her. Helena turned to find the mayor, a young man who had been born the year she and Vincent married. It is not sad, Helena said, wiping her eyes. I am crying because I am happy. Happy that he lived, that we loved each other, that he is remembered this way. These are the best kind of tears. She lived for another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. She died peacefully in her sleep in 1933, 3 months after her 82nd birthday. They buried her next to Vincent on the hillside overlooking the ranch, under a tall oak tree that provided shade in summer and stood stark and beautiful against the snow in winter. The entire town turned out for the funeral, a testament to the respect and affection she had earned over her long life. Rose O'Connor Jenkins gave the eulogy, speaking of a mother who had taught her children to be proud of who they were, to stand tall in every sense of the word, and to meet life's challenges with courage and grace. "My mother was once mocked for being too tall, too different, too much," Rose said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "But she and my father built a life that proved bigger and broader and more beautiful than the small minds that had tried to diminish them. They built a legacy of love and acceptance that lives on in all of us who knew them." The O'Connor Ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down through Edmund Jr. and his children. The house Vincent had built with its specially raised doorways and high counters stood for over a century, a monument to a love that had overcome prejudice and built something lasting. In the town of Humboldt, the story of Vincent and Helena O'Connor became legend, told and retold to new generations. It became a story about acceptance and love, about finding someone who saw you as perfect exactly as you were. It became a reminder that being different was not a curse, but could be a gift, if you were brave enough to embrace it. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the sage and the stars blazed overhead, old-timers would swear they could still see two tall figures walking hand in hand across the ranch land, their love enduring beyond the boundaries of life itself, a testament to the truth that when you find someone who sees you as perfect, who loves you not despite your differences, but because of them, you have found something that lasts forever. The community center still stood in Humboldt, and Vincent's portrait still hung in the main hall. But it was joined now by one of Helena, painted from a photograph taken on their 25th wedding anniversary. In it, she stood tall and proud, her head high and her eyes bright with joy, one hand resting on Vincent's arm. They looked like what they were, partners in every sense of the word, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Below both portraits, a new plaque had been added. It reads simply, "Vincent and Helena O'Connor, a love that taught us all to stand tall." And in the hearts of everyone who heard their story, from the dusty streets of Humboldt to places far beyond the Nevada desert, their legacy lived on, a reminder that true love sees beyond surface differences to the perfect soul beneath, and that sometimes the person the world calls too different is exactly right for someone brave enough to look with open eyes and an open heart.